Hey everybody, we're back. Episode 2, and you are 16 weeks to Ironman Santa Rosa. 16 weeks and about 15 hours. So, but welcome back. Thanks to everybody who watched last week, asked questions. It was good. I appreciate you guys checking in and made you a little more motivated to do another one. Get these rolling, and feedback was good. So here we are for round 2. And just like last week, what I talked about was wanting to do 3 different topics, and now we need to answer questions too. So 3 topics being logistics, a course topic, a training topic, and now we're going to answer questions because we're going to start getting questions from previous episodes or just in general in terms of especially as the race gets closer. So first thing I want to address is logistics. So last week I mentioned the fires and the wildfires that came through here at Santa Rosa. And the hard part is those of you that don't live local don't understand, understandably so, kind of what the impact was or sort of where and what those fires did to the community. I won't get into all sorts of details, but as it relates to the race and it relates to the city, a lot of people were under the impression that the city was somewhat obliterated. And as much devastation as we had in small regions of the city, large parts of Santa Rosa and Sonoma County are very functional, and we're very functional. So from that aspect of it, when you see the race course, and when you're on the race course, you are not going to be seeing any of the fire devastation per se. And a lot of it now, some of it is starting to be, it's been cleared and grass has grown over some of the burned areas. So you'll see very little of that unless you travel into those areas. And then from the race course itself, you won't see any of it. So from that perspective, that's what you're going to find out or see when you come to Santa Rosa and to Sonoma County. The other side is people say, what can I do? I've had people reach out to me and say, how can I help? Where can I donate? And as it relates to the race, I know that Ironman will have a foundation project related to the fire, so you can go that route. But my recommendation has been a couple things. I think our volunteer force is going to be a little bit affected from the fires. People either are going to be engaged, or we've had people displaced that may not be in the area anymore, or they're investing their time and energy in other places for the time being. So I say volunteer. Get your family, get your friends to volunteer. Get your clubs to volunteer. Get this, keep this race going. Keep the community engaged in this event. So that we can bring it for many years to come here in Santa Rosa. So the first thing I say do is volunteer. If you can volunteer, maybe you yourself, but maybe even you yourself, you can do a small shift at registration or something like that before your race. Greet other athletes and do that. That will be terrific. But also family and friends and the thousands of people that come, just to spectate. Spend a little time somewhere during race week. Maybe not on race day if you can't do that, if that's not logistically possible. That's really helpful. And the second thing is spend money in the community. Spend money at local businesses. If you have dollars allocated to a certain amount of dollars allocated to spending while you're here, think about spending in some of the local and small local businesses that have been, maybe you don't see that they're affected, but a lot of people have been affected, be it directly from fire, the devastation, or for small businesses that are affected sort of down chain from that. For example, I have a small business, which is my coaching business, my business is affected because I have athletes who were impacted by the fire that won't race this year. Some will, but there's some that won't race this year because of the things that they're trying to do in the meantime to get themselves going again. So do that, and we'd appreciate that here in the community. So that's my logistics topic for the week. And we'll come every week with something different. And that's not so much logistics, but it surrounds the event. And if you have a logistics issue that you have a question on, again, drop it into any of the Facebook groups or where this video gets posted, or to this actual YouTube page or the YouTube channel, and you can subscribe there as well. So second thing I want to talk about is the course. The swim course. Lake Sonoma, which we talked about last week, is 30 plus miles from downtown Santa Rosa. So the course up at Lake Sonoma, will be the way that it was swum last year, which was not the original course. If you look at that, it's going to be a 2-loop swim. You'll have an exit at the end of each loop. So the course itself will be a out of water start, rolling start, so a rolling time trial type start. So once you step over the timing mat into the water, your time starts. You'll be swimming in an easterly direction to start, which does mean, and I'll address the sun in just a minute, part of it you'll be swimming into the sun, but it's a small leg. You'll swim out, and it's predominantly right-hand turns. It's a long rectangle that goes in towards the marina underneath the bridge into a very calm part of Lake Sonoma. Lake Sonoma can be a choppy body of water. So our recommendation is that if you go to swim train, that's where we encourage people to swim, and that's where the course has been moved to after the original course last year. So it's 2 loops. It's all right-hand turns except for one left-hand turn that brings you back into the boat ramp. You'll get out of the water briefly on the boat ramp, do 180 degrees, and head back out to start loop 2. Now I mentioned the sun. The sun comes up from the east, obviously, and you're swimming in an easterly direction. So you're going to have some glare, assuming that we have clear skies, as you start the swim. So that first outbound leg, the eastern bound leg, could have a lot of glare. So have a couple goggle options. Understand that could be the situation. We often have marine layer in the morning, what we call marine layer to high fog, and it may not be effective. But both races last year, 70.3 and Ironman, both had sun rising in the east up in Cloverdale at Lake Sonoma. A couple other things when we look at that water temperature for the Ironman people, and which we're mostly discussing, is in May. That will be depending on how much rain we get early in the spring and the weather leading up. Last year we were in the upper 50s for water temperature going into the race, which was a little cooler than normal. We would expect low 60s, but if you anticipate 50s, upper 50s, and prepare for that, you'll be just fine. And again, it's going to be temperate, depending on the temperature will be depending on weather coming into the race. For the 70.3 later on, it was a similar situation we had this year for the Ironman race, for last year in 2017. It was on the cutoff of wetsuit legal or not. It was right at 76.1 on race morning for that July race. And that's, again, weather related, but that body of water can get warm up there because Cloverdale is a much warmer part of our county. So there's your water temp. The air temperature, that time of year, early May, upper 40s. Is probably the average, 48 to 50 degrees. So we could be, anywhere in that 40s to lower 50s, which makes for a chilly start if you get out of the water wet. And a lot of that first part of the course is descending, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the bike course. So that's your swim course. One thing to consider too, it's a 1/4 mile from water's edge up through T1. They made some adaptations last year for the second race in July, which was the Ironman race last year. Fully carpeted, fully padded all the way up into T2, so a much better situation. You can do barefoot. There's no reason you can't do it barefoot. It's a long run up, and some of it's quite steep, but when you come, you can get a chance to take a look at that and make some decisions on yourself, how you're going to want to handle that, and how you just approach the run up as far as walk it, run it, jog it. Again, everyone's going to have a different philosophy. And when we talk about course pacing, we talk about that because I think it's an influential part of your decision of how you handle that and how you start your day and how much you want to invest in that 1/4 mile. So it's a long T1. All right. So let's move on to, actually, let me go back. Last week I talked about swimming and investing time in your swimming. And since we're talking about the swim course, I want to talk about that briefly. And as I've had some questions about it, and I just think that it's important with your swimming, not to just get through the swim. I think it's important to get through the swim and have it be as small of an impact on the rest of your day as possible. take as little energy out of you as you possibly can, so that you can use that energy later in the bike and later in the run. And you don't have to spend the early part of the bike trying to recover from the swim. And I see a lot of that. I see a lot of races that I'm there in a coaching capacity when I was racing, as an announcer, and I see that. So keep investing that time in your swimming. Get your swim workouts in now. Get that built up a little bit. And I'll talk about this a little bit in the training component of this episode. But keep doing that. I've seen some people talking about, I'm only swimming twice a week. Do I need to swim more than twice a week? In my opinion, 100% yes, unless you have an issue that's facility related, schedule related, you really can't get there. But when you do get there, invest a little bit more in those two swims. So I think see people downplay the swim. They say, well, I'm not a good swimmer, so I'm going to invest time in other places. And I am just the opposite from a coaching perspective. If that's an athlete's dysfunction, or that's their problem, or that's their weakness, let's invest time in the swim so that on race day, you can take advantage of your strengths on the bike and on the run. So keep working on that. Keep getting your job done in the pool, so that you can have a better race day. And going into it, you also have a better confidence to know that you can handle that situation of being comfortable swimming 2.4. And that's the idea. Be comfortable, not just get through it. Be comfortable swimming 2.4. On that, we'll segue into the training component. And last week, I made a reference to the most influential periods of your training leading up to a race. And I had a friend of mine who was watching. He goes, I know you've talked about that with me. He goes, maybe you could go back and elaborate on that a little bit as far as what you mean by the most influential periods of training. So when I say that, the closer we get to the race, and let's say, we're talking Ironman Santa Rosa or Santa Rosa 70.3, it doesn't matter, or whatever race you're doing, the closer you get to the race up to a certain point, probably up to 2 or 3 weeks out, the training becomes more important. And I shouldn't say more important, but more influential. The more or less that you do affects your race day more positively or more negatively. So the closer that you get, the more influence that training has on your race. So here we are at 16 weeks plus half a day. And it's not that this period doesn't have any influence on the race, it's just less influential. But when I say that, the training that we do now allows us to do the training we want to do later. So what we do in the next 2 weeks allows us to do the training after that better. And then that training layers up. And it's just we keep stacking layers of it on top of each other so that when we get to the point for, let's say, an Ironman, and let's say the middle of the road athlete, let's say the intermediate, that medium level athlete, we're talking at being at 10 to 12 weeks out and really ready to handle the true Ironman training, where right now really shouldn't be thinking about training for Ironman or training for 70.3. You should be training to get ready to handle that influential training. Excuse me. So I hope that cleared that part up. So what you do now sets a foundation. It sets a base, whatever word you want to think about it, but puts you in a position to prepare so that when it gets to 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 weeks, when the training gets bigger and the load is very high, the volume and the load is high of your training, you can handle that, not just get through it, but handle it, recover appropriately, and be able to get to the next block of training. So my recommendation right now is be consistent, know where you're at, do what your body can handle, and do that consistently, and continue to do it. It's okay if you skip workouts, but don't keep skipping the same workout because you don't like it. If it's that one swim that you don't like, don't keep skipping it. And I say this to a lot of people and a lot of athletes. The things that we tend not to like to do, if there's a particular swim we don't like, or a particular bike workout we don't like, or a run, or whatever it is, or a particular discipline, typically it's because we're not good at it, which typically means we need to do that more often. So maybe skip something else. Again, this goes back to what I talk about investing yourself into the race and into your events. So get to that influential period of training, And for me, depending on the athlete, that's anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks out. Some athletes can do shorter build periods because of their foundation over the long term. And some people and some athletes need a longer buildup of Ironman type training. So get ready for that period of training by being consistent now to get ready to do your Ironman training later on. So that was a good question, and I hope that clarified, from a training component, really what you should be thinking about now. Because right now it's not about any single one day or 1 week or one session. It's just about my wife and I talk about, we check a box and move on. We talk to our athletes about that. Check a box and move on. Get the training done. And move on to the next one. So the last thing I want to do is answer a couple questions, mainly one, and it goes back to last week as well. There was a question on the bike course, and because I had mentioned that the bike course is going to change, and we know, if you go in and look at the website pages, the bike courses have been pulled down, and they show that they're going to be updated soon. So they're going to change. So I had a question on, do you know what the elevation is going to be? And that's always a common question, and what the course is. And I'll know as soon as they, like I said, I'll know, but I'll also be able to get you more information, and we can dedicate one of these episodes just to that, because it always seems to generate a lot of questions in terms of the roads and the surface, how much climbing, et cetera, et cetera. But I can tell you this to start. Let's start with the Ironman race, because that's the first one. Last year's version, it would be near impossible, unless they do the same course, to find 112 miles that has less feet of climbing. That was a pretty flat course as far as Sonoma County goes for last year, and it was under 3,000 feet of climbing. So if I had to guess, it will be, only thing I could guesstimate now is that feet of climbing will be more than last year. It would be near impossible to find it to be the same or less, based on the roads that we have and how you're going to have to get from point A to point B in Santa Rosa. One thing we do know, you're going to have 400-foot elevation loss from Lake Sonoma down to Santa Rosa. So you will have 400 feet of elevation loss. It's a net downhill, which probably comes into play a little bit more with the 70.3 race, since they're only going from Lake Sonoma to Santa Rosa. And I'll say the same thing about that event as well, as far as the amount of climbing, that it's got to be similar to last year's, which was just under 2,000 feet of climbing, but a net elevation loss of 400 feet from Lake Sonoma down to Santa Rosa. So again, going 56 miles from Lake Sonoma to Santa Rosa, which is, as a crow flies, just over 30 miles. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in how far they can go outside of the valleys and what hills that they have to go over in general to get their bike miles. So I'd expect a similar amount of climbing or elevation gain for that race, with a net elevation loss of 400 feet. So that's what I have for this week. Thanks again for joining in. If you have questions, again, pop them up in the Facebook pages where I drop this video. You can drop them into this YouTube page. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube page. That way you'll get a notification when we go live. I've talked to some people. We're going to try and pull some guests in, be it sitting here with me, live here with me, or pull them in on a Hangout chat. So we're both here together on the video screen as we get a little closer, and we can get that done. So hey, have a good week. Have a good weekend. Enjoy your training. Stay safe. Be consistent. Right? Be consistent. Don't go overboard. 16 weeks for some people, they look at it and go, oh my gosh, it's only 16 weeks. I look at it and say, 16 weeks ago. It's a long haul. It's 4+ months for us to get there. So keep at it. We'll see you for episode 3 next week. All right. Take care. Bye.